I will teach you how to play the Danish Gambit. And I still remember way back when, 10 years ago, when I started... Nee, dat is te veel intro. I will teach you how to play the Danish Gambit. And this is a very easy to learn opening. And once you know this opening, it's so easy to also destroy your opponents because it's so aggressive, tactical, they won't know what's coming, and you will get a lot of quick wins, move 10, move 15 wins with this opening. So this opening starts after pawn to e4, pawn to e5. This is an opening for white, and there are basically 5 parts to this video, 5 IDs you need to know if you want to play this opening. So we are going to start off and we will play our pawn to d4. So basically we are immediately challenging the black pawn. Black of course doesn't have to take this, but most of the time, about 3 in every 4 games, I think they will take this. Even if they don't take this, the position is not really that great for black. So most of the time they are going to capture. And this is known as the center game, where you can recapture with the queen, but we are not going to do that. We will play pawn to c3, known as the Danish Gambit. And I still remember more than 10 years ago, when I just started playing chess, if somebody played the Danish Gambit against you, yeah, you were pretty much lost before the game even started. But nowadays, I don't see it as much anymore. So the idea is we are gambiting a pawn. First, we let black capture here on d4. And then now we are also offering them this pawn on c3. And most of the time they will take this because, well, basically, even if we do recapture with the knight, for example, black will always just be up a pawn. So this is the start of the Danish Gambit. So we have 5 positions. We are going to start off here as white, and we will not recapture the pawn. We are going to play the bishop to c4 because this opening is all about going for the attack. Playing aggressive moves, we don't care about losing a couple of pawns, especially not if it helps us to clear up the center of the board and also to gain some tempo. So black can, of course, capture another pawn, and this is one of the most popular moves. We are going to look at all variations where black does this, and also what if they don't capture the second pawn. We're also going to take a look at that. So of course, black is now immediately threatening to win a lot of material and also win our rook. So we do have to recapture, but we don't really mind because of course you can already see we have the 2 bishops, we have the pawn in the center, the queen is opened up, and black doesn't have anything. So this is our starting position. And the first thing we will look at is what if black plays the bishop to b4, which is, let me check, yeah, one of the most popular moves. About 1 in every 3 games you will get this bishop to b4 check. So okay, we are in check, we have to do something about it. So it's pretty simple, we can just block the check with the knight, and this is just an extra piece that we can also develop. There are a lot of ways that black can quickly go wrong and basically destroy his own position. One of them is if they capture here on c3, because the problem is they are just, again, trading away one of their only active pieces, and all of a sudden we do have these 2 bishops lined up. The queen can also enter the position, so this is not going to end well. Let's say, for example, they play knight to f6. A very common theme in this opening is to push the pawn to e5. So the knight has to move, and if you look at this, yeah, the knight doesn't really have that many squares. And most of the time they try to move it, for example, to e4. And this is a really important tactic you need to know, and that's always sack the bishop on f7. They usually recapture with the king, and then you can go check and also win the knight. Or you can also give a check here and also win the knight. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, pretty much if you get this position, let's just say we do the check, we get this position. We are, of course, in a great position because we are basically fighting against a king that hasn't castled, it can't castle. Black doesn't have anything developed, and yeah, black's still in trouble. Even though they still have an extra pawn, they are in a lot of trouble. Sometimes you will also see variations where black tries to play the queen to e7. This is very common in all Danish Gambit variations, but this is usually a very bad move for black as well. But this is a bit more complex to punish. Usually the plan is just play queen to e2. You can just remember this move, play queen to e2, because of course we are now unpinning the pawn from our king so that again we can capture. Because if we don't put anything in between, we can't capture the knight. So we have to do something like this, and then immediately black is in trouble again. Black has to move the knight, and if we take a quick glance at these squares, well, there's only one move, going all the way back with the knight here to g8. And of course, if you look at this, yeah, it's just devastating already for black. Still, all the pieces are here in the first 2 ranks. We are going to continue the attack. For example, knight h3. We can play this, of course, because the bishop can't capture us. Let's say knight to c6. knight to f4, we want to get our knight into the attack, d6, and then knight to d5. And this is very common, playing knight to d5, especially against the queen e7 plan. You can also, of course, use your other knight for this if you still have that one. Because whenever you play this, it's basically already game over. Because the queen has to go, and after that we can take with a check, and also, of course, yeah, it's check. We are grabbing this pawn. They probably have to block. You can play something like knight takes here. So all of this just to show you that if they take here on c3, basically it's a free game, and this happens quite a lot. Also very popular is black playing knight to f6, which we are going to continue with for our first variation, which is the variation after they pin our knight and they don't take it. Here we simply have the move queen to b3, and this is also a really important move to remember, just as a general idea of, okay, I can play queen to b3 and these variations. Because of course this is a double attack. We both pressure the bishop, and we also put pressure on f7. And black has two problems at the same time. They have to both make sure that they defend this pawn and also defend the bishop. And it's not really easy to deal with this. Most players are just going to capture, and then you get a position like this, and again, we still have a lot of pressure. They can also sometimes try to play queen e7. This is a bit more high level. I don't think you will see this a lot, but of course this also stops the plan. But yeah, we can just again try to block, so we don't have any issues here, and it's still quite difficult to play. For example, if they take, we can castle, and black is always losing. We will see more variations like this. But most of the time they will capture, and here we can recapture with the queen. Most players actually that play the Danish Gambit, they capture with the bishop, and it's not so good, because we just want to capture with the queen so that we can potentially go for a checkmate, of course, on g7. And if the knight ever moves, let's say the knight, for example, takes here, of course, we have a lot of good moves. For example, here you can play bishop to g7, but the most amazing move here, I mean queen to g7, of course, but the most amazing move is bishop takes f7. Brilliant move. And this opening really is filled with brilliant moves. The king has to take, the queen can take with check, king has to move. In the end, we can always capture the knight, make sure we can also capture it with a check, because otherwise, yeah, you might just run into this and then you lose your queen. So make sure you always capture it with a check. And yeah, this is a very common mistake by black as well, and it's really tough to play this position from the black side, because almost every single move that black can play is a mistake. Probably the best is to castle, but still, yeah, it doesn't really look too great for black. We can just continue with normal development, knight to f3. And again, we are setting up a trap, because if black takes this, it's just a checkmate in one, so they can never really capture this. They can play something like d6, we can castle, they can play knight to c6, we can play rook to e1. And this position is what happens if black pretty much plays all of the top engine moves, about 12-13 moves in a row. Then you get something like this, where, okay, white is still down with 2 pawns, but we have so much activity that it actually doesn't matter, and the engine thinks this is equal, because, okay, we are down 2 pawns, but we have more attacking opportunities. And if you want to play this, it's very important that you always play the most aggressive moves. You always play for the tactics, you play for the checkmates, and don't start trading pieces. Because if you can just imagine, if we take away all of these minor pieces, well, we would just have a simple game with 2 kings, and we just have, I think 5 pawns, yeah, and black would have 7 pawns. So you don't want to get into a game like that. You want to be aggressive and go for the attack. Now we are going to take a look at the second variation. So again, we play our Danish Gambit, white accepts it, we let them take another pawn, we take with the bishop, and they play knight to f6 immediately, which is the second most popular move if they don't go for this check. Many of the ideas that I have shown you are very similar, but against this you can pretty much immediately push the pawn and basically ask black, like, what are you doing with this knight here? There's not really any good solution for black. Most of the time they will try to throw in the check anyways. They might also play knight to e4, but I hope you can already see the tactic here, because we have seen this before. Bishop takes, brilliant move, and then we have a check, and then we can also take this knight. So yeah, a pretty bad position for black. Sometimes, as I said, they always try to play this queen e7. They think they are being smart, but it doesn't really work, because you just play queen to e2, and the knight still has no options. The knight still has to go back. For example, knight to c3, and now you will see something very amazing. Let's say knight to c6, bam, we play the knight to d5. We attack the queen, We also attack this, so the queen has to go back. And I don't think you will find a move here. I was even surprised that this is possible, but there is a move here, knight f6 check. It's just insane. We are giving a brilliant move check. This knight can be captured 3 times, but we don't care, because if they capture us, we capture back. It's a check. They have to block with a piece. We can capture the piece. The queen is under attack. We can trade, and then we can win the rook and the corner as well. So yeah, this is a pretty devastating position. Pretty much they have to play with the bishop, and they have to go for this, which is similar to what we have seen before. But against this specific variation, I wanted to show you this line where you can actually play the bishop to c3. And it's important to remember this, because usually you play knight to c3. And if you just play it without thinking, you are limiting your own options. Because with bishop to c3, we are immediately asking black the question, like, what are you going to do to solve your problems? Your knight is under attack by the pawn, but your bishop is also under attack by our bishop. So pretty much they are forced to take, and then we can take with the knight, take control of those squares, and still we are attacking their knight. So they pretty much have to go back, which is of course also losing. The difference is if you play this, all of a sudden black might try to attack you here, or they might try to play pawn to d5. And yeah, it's all very complicated. So I would just recommend, if you get this check, play the bishop out. Most of the time they will have to take you. There's not really much else. Queen e7, you already know. Queen e2 doesn't really help. And now they have to move back the knight. Again, if they play queen e7, queen e2, knight still has to go back, and then we can just do normal development. Attack this queen. The queen has to go back, and yeah, this is already quite bad for black. Most of the time they can also just move back with the knight, but of course that's also losing. For example here, of course, we always play for the attack. Attack this, they push it, we attack this. This is also a checkmate threat. They might defend with the queen, and we're just going to develop the knight. For example, this, we can castle. And black doesn't really have any way to develop this knight. They have no future chances of castling here on the king side. Yeah, nothing is really working for black. And this position is already +4 for white, even though we are down 2 pawns. Next up is something you will probably never see, but it's something that the grandmasters love playing. So of course we play our Danish Gambit. This is fine. And the thing that grandmasters love to play in this position is pawn to d5. Which isn't necessarily super good, but it's just what they seem to play in the few games that are played in this position. Well, if they play this, we basically have 3 options to capture this pawn. So what black is trying to do is black is trying to give us back a pawn to limit our attacking opportunities. So we are going to accept this, but we are going to accept it with the bishop. Because, well, if you take it with the pawn, we are blocking our own bishop. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. And if we take it with the queen, we are basically asking for queen trades. And I'd already told you, you don't want to get too many trades in, because if you have too many trades, you're just going to get an endgame in which you are losing because you are down 1 or 2 pawns. So we want to capture with the bishop, and this still allows for some potential tricks as well. Most of the time they will play knight to f6. Not really anything else is possible. Of course, if they move the bishop, they always have problems here as well. Sometimes, even if they move this bishop, let's say they go for this check, which is also possible, we just have the same plan as always. And you can already see that in many of these lines, we are going to have checkmating threats as well. So most of the time they play knight to f6, and they try to go for a counter attack here on our central structure. But there's a pretty insane move here, and I hope you can see it. It's a beautiful tactic. What are we going to play as white? And we have seen similar things before. It is bishop takes f7. Because of course this is a check, and if the king takes us, we are grabbing this queen. And if the king moves, let's say they move here, we can basically just play this. We can protect our bishop, and we have a pretty good position. The king is in the open, and we are equal in material again, so that's also nice. The thing is, most of the time they will capture your bishop, and they will drop their queen, because they have a counter trick. They can play bishop to b4 check, and this is a discovered attack. We get a check, and they can also win back the queen. But here what you can do is you can actually drop back the queen, so we get this position, and now the material is equal. But you can already see that even though the material is equal, what is the black king doing here on f7? White is better developed, and for example something like rook to d8, knight to f3, because of course we want to make sure that we don't run into any problems either. So knight to f3, they play the knight, we castle. And the engine says this is equal, but I would say it's better for white, because of course we are castled, we have the pawn in the center, we have more developed pieces, so you should be fine in this position. Then there are two more variations we need to cover. One of them is, of course, what if we play this Danish Gambit? But black is a bit suspicious. They don't want to take this pawn on b2 and help us develop, which is a smart thing to do by black, because they realize that if they grab too many pawns, they are going to be behind in development. So black might try something else. The good thing about this position is that you barely have to remember anything, because it doesn't really matter what black plays. If they play pawn to d6, we grab this. If they play the knight out, we grab this. If they play this to attack the pawn, we also grab the pawn on c3. So pretty much whatever happens, we're always going to get our position like this. For example, knight to f6. And most of the time in this line, the thing that I recommend is playing queen to b3. There are different lines which you can find in the Lichess study. The link is below this video in the pinned comment. It's available on Patreon. So this is what I recommend, playing queen to b3, immediately attacking this again, because black is already in some trouble. They basically have to move the queen and block up their own pieces just to protect this. Sometimes players play bishop to e6, but of course it doesn't make any sense. You take it, you win a pawn. Yeah, I don't know why, but some people play this. Actually playing the queen over is the best approach. And we can just continue with our development, and you can already see that black is a bit stuck for space in a way. They are always stuck in their own camp here on the first three ranks, and we are really putting on the heat and putting on some pressure here. We are also giving away a free pawn in these variations, but we have seen this before. This is pretty bad for black, because whenever they take this, we can just castle, and you have to see that this is a bingo position. They are all lined up on the e-file, and we can just put a rook here. We can attack the knight, we can attack the queen. Yeah. For example, let's say they play this, knight to c5, we can just move, and then, yeah, this is not good for black. If they want to play bishop here, you can also play the rook out, and black is always stuck in the center and always losing some material. Then next up, the final position is what happens if we play e4, e5. We grab this, then we offer them the pawn here, and now instead of capturing, they play something which grandmasters also love to play, and that is just not going for the pawn grab, but again playing this pawn to d5. And that's the final thing you need to know. So what are we going to do here? Well, multiple things are happening. We can take this in two ways, and we can also take this. But I would say the best move in general is to capture this pawn, because basically we are forcing them to move the queen out. And usually in chess, moving your queen out early is not so good, because she can be attacked, and when she is attacked, you have to move her, you are losing some time, and you are getting behind. And that is why I recommend going for this position, taking with the e-pawn, taking with the c-pawn. And this reminds me a lot of the Scandinavian defense, because, well, the black queen is here in the middle of the board, we will be able to attack her. Most likely she will have to go back somewhere, maybe this, maybe a5, those are options. The only difference with the actual Scandinavian is, of course, usually you have a pawn here and black can play a pawn here. So this is a bit better, I would say, than the Scandinavian. For example, knight to c6, they are trying to grab our pawn. So yeah, you don't want to play this, of course, because you are just losing a pawn. You want to protect it first, so we're going to protect it. And this is one variation that I'm going to show you where black can try to be annoying, but you just have to know what to do against this. And that is, black can try to win this pawn, but you can always protect it, and then at some point we might even give it up, because we will get some counterattack. So black will attack it, we are going to defend it, and black can pin our knight to the queen, because, well, this pawn is not here, so they can move out the bishop. We can protect this, but you can already see we are starting to get into some trouble, because in some line, black's going to capture, and then they might try to capture here in the center. But if they go for this immediately, that would be a big blunder, because of course you take here with the bishop, check, and we get a free queen. But this idea does exist, and it does exist mostly in this variation, where they play check with the bishop, we block with the knight, and then they try to take, and again they have to be careful here. Of course, if they take this, it's again a big blunder because of bishop takes c6, but they can sometimes be really annoying and make sure that we can't castle. And then, yeah, you have to go for something like this. Bishop takes c6, queen check, and take with the king. And you just go for a position like this. The most common variation is the one where black will castle. So this is a position we just had. We block the check. As I just told you, this doesn't really work because otherwise they lose the queen. So what they will do is they will castle, because their plan is to try and capture this in the future. And now they have the rook and the queen and the knight all lined up to capture this. So we can play the knight out, but they will always pin it with their bishop. And this is the point where we are going to lose a pawn potentially. We are going to castle. And the thing that black can do is they can play the queen out to a5. And of course they have to move the queen because the queen is under attack and they can't capture this because they would lose the queen. So they move the queen out to a5. And this is one of those variations where, yeah, we are going to lose a pawn probably, but we will have some amazing counterattack. So we have to calculate that this knight is basically gone. This will be captured. And that means that this will be attacked twice and only defended once. So pretty easy to remember. We just have to add an extra defender. We are going to play the bishop to e3. But this also leads into some problems, because takes, takes, takes. And black is up a pawn. But we have some amazing trick here. We can play the rook out to c1 to attack the queen. The queen has to move. She also doesn't have many options, but the queen has to move. And now we have a pretty damn nice move. And that is rook takes c6. We take the knight, because this destroys the castled position. And now, even though it's not immediately clear, we are going to win this, because the king will be too exposed. For example, we just play knight to e5, because we want to get the queen in, we want to get some trade. So for example this, they develop the knight, and the king is not very safe here. There are multiple variations which can win. By the way, you can take this. If they try to defend this, you can take this. So yeah, pretty much they're always losing. But you can even just continue with the attack. You don't have to immediately grab this. They can defend with the rook. We can go for checkmate with the queen. They can always try to block. We can always move the queen. Now we are putting pressure here. This is also a discovered attack with the rook. Then you can, for example, get in your bishop. And the goal in this position, the specific position doesn't matter, but the goal is to just keep attacking. And in the end, you will get something, for example, like this. And then you can even play queen to b3. We have two pieces hanging and we don't even care about it, because we can potentially go for a checkmate. Again, the queen has to block, but now we have check. And of course, we are also picking up the queen with check. And it doesn't even matter how I recapture, for example, this, bam, another check. Probably they have to sack the rook. Maybe this. Yeah, and it's queen versus rook. And of course, this is easily winning. If you enjoy this opening, you should definitely check out my Lichess study, top pinned comment, because there are more variations there. But I think this is a great opening if you want to have some fun and get some aggressive games going.